turn a problem into a solution. You can always look for an opportunity in adversity. That's something that my father told me. And whenever you have a situation on the verge of a collapse, you always have an opportunity to make a massive change. Now the problem is that the people that are always ready to make change are the extremists. And I would refer to the extremists right now are Monsanto, Cargill, Dow, all of those big guys are the extremists. They have their own agenda. They've got, they're connected to the people that print money, and they're ready for that change to occur. Whatever, and maybe they won't exist. It's really hard to be able to predict. The moderates, which is what I would consider all of us, have to be just as ready as them. And in the past, moderates have not been the ones that have been ready to embrace this type of opportunity. And that's what I see this as. This system has to go through systemic change, and this is one possible outcome, and we're ready to take that on, which I believe that we're getting there. Then we can actually start to redirect the direction of our culture. Next slide, please. So I want to pose another question. What does a sustainable food system look like? And before I answer that, or any of you answer that, I want to ask one more question, which is, or in fact, I'll change the way that I word that. Marion McBride came up to me and said, Rob, how's your marriage doing these days? I said, oh, it's sustainable. Do you guys feel sorry for me? So I don't think we're actually looking for a sustainable food system. I think we've been working in a system for the last 10,000 years that's degenerative. That's my belief. And I believe we've got a lot of repair to do. And that's where I think permaculture can play a role in that. Holistic resource management can play a role in that. Biodynamics can play a role in that. There's lots of different people out there practicing lots of different things that basically work on very, very similar philosophies. I believe we need a regenerative food system. I believe we need a system that when we make that conscious decision to eat 3 times a day, the planet gets better. We probably need to do that for the next 10,000 years, and at that point, then we can move to a sustainable food system. So that's the kind of spectrum that I'm talking about. So permaculture is a regenerative design science. It's a design science that's based on creating systems that are more positive than negative. And again, this comes back to that myth. In the housing industry, we now have net neutral houses. We have zero-scaping. So you can actually turn your front lawn into something that does absolutely nothing. You can take a degenerative lawn and you can turn it into something that does nothing. And I want to coin the term posiscapes. Landscapes that both feed us and create space for ecologies. And I want to coin the term positive footprint. If we don't start to change the words in our vocabulary, we're going to keep going down the path that we're going down. We have got to start taking control of these words because we are a species of dialogue. Next slide, please. So what does regenerative farming look like? What is this lens that we actually have to put all of our decisions through in order to ensure that there will be topsoil in the future, that there will be community and schools and water? We want farms that produce net positive calories. So we actually need to turn our farming systems, or we can't just do accounting with dollars and cents, we actually have to do energy accounting. And again, this doesn't rest all on the farmers. This system is going to be created by everybody within this culture, okay? Because it benefits all of us. We want farms that run on solar energy, okay? The amount of solar energy that comes in a day. We want farms that produce nutrient-dense foods, topsoil, that increase fertility and diversity on an annual basis, that allow growers, ecologies, and eaters to thrive simultaneously. This concept of community. We want farms that improve water quality. There's plenty of examples of these all around the world that provide habitat for other creatures, that reduce pollution, and that cycle nutrients, and as I said a couple times, build community. I think that this is absolutely central And most regenerative farming systems that have succeeded on this planet start with people care. Okay? And I'll talk about a few of those in a few seconds here. So where do we look for answers? Nature doesn't have garden gnomes going around managing these systems. Nature doesn't have garden gnomes dropping fertilizer, pesticides, herbicides, and taking entire systems down so that the deer can thrive in one area and no other species can. So nature's got the perfect system of abundance. It balances all of the resources. There is no waste in nature. Waste is only in human nature. So the waste of one system becomes the resource of another. So we can change how all of our systems function so that the outputs of one system can become the inputs of another. And a lot of what conventional farming has focused on is what I call siloing. So the confined animal feeding operation is an extreme version of a siloed system where we're trying to specialize. And that creates all sorts of problems. And the reason it creates problems is because we're fundamentally working on a planet that is based on 2.1 billion years of ecological research and development. And we're trying to come in and say, no. We don't want integrated holistic systems. We want to silo everything because it makes more financial sense. And our financial system is just a human construct. But we've got to function within the physical requirements of the planet. So we need to look to these systems for that type of information. And so permaculture is based on designing systems for human habitat patterned after nature. That's our university. That's where we go and get information on how to pattern our entire system. The way we build our houses, to the way that we grow our food. Alright, so let's kind of build on this lens a little bit. And let's kind of compare two systems kind of on the extreme ends. So immature ecosystems are basically systems that are low in diversity. So we could also put the word monocrop there. Based in annual plants. And this blows me away when I think about it. Our entire 7 billion plus people on this planet rely on pioneer species that require tillage and growing every single year. Like we have to go out there and plant the same thing over and over and over again. And we just kind of accepted that as normal. But if one year all of a sudden oil becomes too expensive and it doesn't make financial sense to go out and plant those annual crops, what's going to happen? One thing is we're going to lose a ton of topsoil. But we won't eat. And so these are systems that are very fragile and they require massive resource inputs. And generally they're degenerative. They're based in competition. And we're the competitors. We're competing against all the ecosystems. They're based in parasitism, nutrient leakage. So the only way we can keep these systems going is by continually putting new nutrients into the system. They're based on export. And whenever you're exporting something from your farm, there's an old farm saying that the only thing you should ever export off your farm is something that can walk off the farm. Because generally things that can walk off the farm take less nutrients off the farm than things that are driven off the farm. Fast change, so any kind of small adjustment in weather or water or anything creates fast change in these systems, and water export by drainage. Okay, now both of these two systems receive the exact same amount of solar energy. So they're both kind of working on the same playing field. But mature ecosystems are based in high diversity. They're based in perennial plants, so they're a lot more resilient. Those perennial plants function in cooperation. Mutualism, so there's lots of symbiotic relationships. And those symbiotic relationships are what reduce parasitism. Nutrient circulation, so the nutrient stays on site. When a deer harvests or a squirrel harvests a nut, it doesn't ship it off to India so that a squirrel in India can eat that nut. It eats it right where it is, and it leaves what it eats right where it is. So this is another argument for local food, is keeping that nutrient local. On-site consumption, slow change, and water export by evaporation. And water export by evaporation pumps that water back up into the atmosphere so the farms further east of us perspective all the way back up to a rural perspective. Farm number 1 is an urban farm run by a friend of mine in Kelowna. And he's really going against the grain because he's doing, he's basically taken all these problems that I've talked about and he's given them the middle finger and he's shown that we can absolutely go against the grain. We can make a good living, we can feed the world, and we can do it in a way that inspires new farmers to come in and start. His name is Curtis Stone, and he runs a farm called Green City Acres. And so his farm is based in cooperation because he's kind of taken that CSA model, community supported agriculture. He's created symbiotic relationships, okay, so mutualism. So he feeds restaurants his produce from his gardens, and the restaurants feed him their compost. So now he's diverting compost from the landfill. That compost is being utilized on his little small farm, which is 3/4 of an acre. That goes into his garden, which allows him to at least be net neutral on his soil gain and loss per year. So he's got nutrient circulation going. And because he's working within his bioregion, which is Kelowna, he's got on-site consumption, or very, very close to on-site consumption. And composting toilets aren't quite legal yet in terms of being able to cycle those nutrients. And I know it's a very controversial subject. I'm not talking about plant soil. But we need to start having a dialogue about how to cycle human nutrients back onto